Yes, y'all, the crew is here.
We are a unit unstoppable. We are a unit of choice. We are a unit that's powerful.
It's a brand new day.
What's empowering is seeing yourself.
It celebrates expressions of all kinds.
I'm willing to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves.
Let's celebrate our right to exist and to exist with joy.
This is gold standard.
We can change this world for the better.
Yes!
That's what it is. It's honesty.
My main focus now is to take action.
Directors.ca.
Hi everyone, my name is Samir Balu. I'm the Real Ideas Coordinator at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. I'm an Indian Canadian man with medium length black hair, wearing a navy blue sweater and sitting in an office chair in my apartment living room. Welcome to Sustainable Storytelling Careers, the final panel in our Real Ideas conference themed Here in the Future Past. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that Real Asians offices and main activities are located on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land and resources. As we continue with a digitally hosted festival that will screen Canada-wide, we encourage audiences to learn the specific histories and stories of the lands they are settled on, the lands of Treaty 11, many treaty agreements, and traditional unceded territories that continue to demand justice and to support the ongoing work of Indigenous leaders and communities. While acknowledging the festival's 25-year history of growth and challenge, we renew and refresh our commitments to more abundance and complexity in Asian and Asian diasporic film and media arts. Regardless of our pathways of arrival, we all currently benefit from the Canadian government's broken treaties and imposed violence, and reckon openly with our responsibility to this land and its caretakers. We name the ways we are complicit in structures of white supremacy, and also recognize that we are still in a time of great upheaval and need. We honor the longstanding work of organizers, creatives, and communities that continue to give us hope, language, and possibility, and work toward critical and reflexive allyship with Indigenous peoples exercising their sovereignty and working toward justice and freedom. For today's panel, we would like to thank the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, Ontario Creates, and the Province of Ontario for their support. Special thank you to the Writers Guild of Canada for sponsoring this panel. And just a reminder that if you're watching live from our Watch portal and want to ask us a question, please send it through the chat or the Ask a Question box. If you're viewing from a phone, the chat will be at the bottom of the screen. Thank you to Jamie and Carmelle, the amazing ASL interpreters in today's session. And thank you to Tony, our great live captioner. Lastly, we'd love to hear your feedback about our panels. Please visit realasian.com/RI survey and let us know what you like and what you would like to see from us next year. We'll have a QR code posted up at the end with the survey. Each entry enters you in a draw to win a survey prize. We'll take a 5-minute break in the middle of the session for everyone to stretch their legs and grab some water. I'll now hand over the rest of the time to the amazing Janet-Rose, who will be introducing us to the rest of the panelists today.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this panel for Sustainable Storytelling Careers, where we will get to speak with 3 amazing directors who I will introduce in a minute. I am a Vietnamese Canadian female sitting in a yellow floral top in my apartment with some plants behind me. I will be speaking to the camera, and I will be introducing 3 amazing director creators. So let's get started with our Sustainable Storytelling Careers panel. All right, so first off, I would love to introduce Sherren Lee. Sherren is sitting in an office-like environment. She's an Asian Canadian female. She has plants behind her and headphones on her head. And Sherren is the award-winning director of short films Benjamin and The Things You Think I'm Thinking. Her TV credits include Murdoch Mysteries, Hudson and Rex, Coroner, Kim's Convenience, Odd Squad, Dino Dana, and Endlings. She's currently wrapping up her first feature film. Next, we'll introduce JP Larocque. So there we go. JP is an individual with a beard wearing headphones on his head. Oh, sorry, their head. Pardon me, pronouns are they, them. And they are sitting in front of a board, and there's some plants on the side. And JP's recent work on CBC's Coroner, alongside that, JP has written on CTV's Jan, CBC's Digstown, Netflix's Another Life, Shudder's Slasher, and is creator and executive producer of the Out TV digital series Gay Nerds. As a journalist, JP has bylines in the Toronto Star, The Walrus, Maclean's, Extra, The Beaverton, and Flair. A proud member of both the LGBTQ+ and BIPOC communities, JP is committed to diversity and inclusion in all of their work. Thank you for joining us, JP. And then last but not least, of course, we'll spotlight Mayumi Yoshida. And Mayumi is sitting on an office chair. She has black hair. She's an Asian female as well, with some blonde or bleach in her hair, white boxes behind her, and some plants. Mayumi was born in Japan, raised in 3 continents. She is an award-winning actor, writer, director based in Vancouver, BC. She's an alumna of WIDC, which is the Women in the Director's Chair program, and currently the participant of Warner Media Times Canadian Academy Access Writers Program and the TIFF Netflix Talent Accelerator Fellowship. Since making her directorial debut on Akashi, she has created many short films which center around Asian characters and has won many awards locally and internationally. She is currently in development of her first feature film, Akashi. Okay, and then briefly about me, I'm Janet-Rose. I'm an actress and writer. My work focuses on feminism, horror, queerness, and the Asian diaspora. I'm currently the co-chair of the ACTRA Toronto Diversity and Inclusion Committee, was recently elected to ACTRA Toronto Council, and I am currently a resident at the Canadian Film Centre CBC Actors Conservatory. And I am so excited to be here and speaking on this panel with some amazing Canadian heroes.
My goodness. So are you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started with, let's do some stories. Since you're all amazing storytellers, let's start with, how did you learn to tell a story before working in TV and film? As we all know, TV and film can sometimes be a very non-linear path. So I'd love to hear how you got started. We could start with JP.
Oh, for sure. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I basically started to learn storytelling because I watched a lot of TV as a kid. I grew up of a generation where it was like my parents were kind of, it was like the latchkey kid time, right? So it was like I'd come home from school for lunch. I would, after school, I'd be watching soap operas. I just watched a lot of TV all the time. And I think that kind of built within me a bit of like a storytelling impulse or a desire to want to kind of tell stories like that and lots of different types of stories. But I would say kind of after kind of watching maybe too much television in childhood, I went to film school and I did like some different screenwriting courses as well. And then that kind of helped me like solidify the formats in terms of storytelling. But I would say it all kind of goes back to that initial sitting in front of the big wooden box in my parents' den, for sure.
Great. Mayumi, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, my story is very similar to JP. I think I memorized the TV program that was in Japan. The TV program is like on the back of the newspaper. So I memorized from like 4 p.m. onwards. I knew all the channels.
That's how I learned time. That's how I learned time, was through like the TV guide. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Amazing. No, it's yeah, I just watched a lot of movies and TV series. I started originally as an actor, so that was my first in the storytelling world, and that's where I met Janet-Rose as well. But I think it was just 4 or 5 years ago that I started writing and directing, and it kind of came from necessity because I couldn't find a Japanese writer or director. So, and it was for a short film. So with the imposter syndrome that I have, I was like, if it's 10 minutes, people may not find out how bad it is, how bad I am. And they got to do it. And then on, it was just feeling like there's an audience for personal stories, for a person of color and for women, and discovering so many more untold stories around my circle, and just going to film festivals, getting so inspired. That kind of inspired me, I think, to become a storyteller.
I love that. Sherren?
It's such a good question because I truly am not sure how I learned to storytell. I wasn't like a huge TV kid or anything. Of course, watched lots of movies and things growing up, but it wasn't like a huge part of my identity. I did want to be an actor from ever since I was a little girl, so I would pretend to be characters all the time. I know that in high school, I had a creative writing class that I really enjoyed. And yeah, I think I just was really interested in emotions. And then when I directed a play for the first time in university, I had just been acting, in school plays and things. And when I directed a play, I don't even really know how I knew how to do it. It was probably just from being in plays in my childhood. And I just sort of started doing it independently and then honing my skills that way. I think I just learned by doing.
Well, I love that you bring that up, where it's like, how do you even know? And I love that all of you were pretty much kind of like, it's all came from various pathways. So I want to ask what training, if at all, because I know JP and Mayumi touched on film school, but Sherren, also, did you have any like official training? And then I'd love to touch on how being a racialized person affects that, because university and schools and film schools can be very colonial or set in these hierarchical ways that sometimes aren't made for people like us. So I'd love if you had any points and wanted to touch on that. Whoever would like to jump in first, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say I didn't go to film school. And the first kind of formal training I had was attending the director's lab at the Canadian Film Center, but that program is kind of like a semi-professional program. It's not really classes. You kind of just are thrown in, and you do exercises and workshops and things. And it was perfect for me because I had already been doing some work as an independent filmmaker. And then going to the CFC for me was the first time where I was in a room of other creatives and filmmakers. So for me, it was the first time I was able to kind of validate my own skills and be like, oh, I'm actually different, or this is how I'm different, or yeah. So those structures that you're talking about, it was harder for me to distinguish those things. Also because CFC is maybe a little less structured than other programs. Yeah.
Mayumi?
Yeah, I didn't go to film school for filmmaking, so I only went to film school for acting. So for filmmaking, honestly, it was just the hours on set and then the accumulative time as an actor, just facing scripts over and over and over again. I think I also work as a dialogue coach and a cultural consultant on set as well. So that gave me a full 4 seasons on set, and it was like an unofficial shadowing experience. So that gave me a good idea of how episodic directors work. And so it was very practical, I guess. And a lot of YouTube videos. Shout out to Every Frame a Painting. And now I'm friends with them, and they're amazing. But it's like the community has taught me so much because I didn't go to film school. And and then going to film festivals and meeting people, and again, just hearing their experience, learning from what they did on their films. That's sort of been my training.
JP, I'd love to hear, on top of how your views are of this, how your journalism comes into play too as a storyteller.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's actually, it is kind of funny because, so like, you know, coming from like immigrant parents, it is like when you're like, oh, I'm going to follow an artistic path. I mean, I'm making a generalization, but many times it's kind of like maybe not the ideal thing to pitch. So for me, I think I kind of made a concession with my mother where she was like, well, you like to tell stories. Why don't you become a journalist? So I went into journalism school actually at Ryerson in my first year of university. And it was a great program. I personally did not like it. So I transferred out and I went into film school at U of T. But in speaking about kind of like, I find it really interesting kind of when you were introducing this question about kind of like racialized identity and access, because it is like, I went to U of T and it was like studying film as art. It wasn't like practical, like you weren't actually learning to like do the craft. And I really wanted to learn how to do the craft. And I remember there was this program they had where they brought in a specific filmmaker who could kind of like mentor these different students to be like, this is how you kind of break into the industry. And the filmmaker, you know, coming from a very specific place of privilege, was like, well, you know what, you should just like quit school and grab a camera and just like go and just like do the thing. And I was like, that is not a reality for me. Like, I know I have to finish school. This is something that I committed to. I'm paying for it. Anyway, all of which is to say, I ended up going through that process and then eventually kind of took lots of like night courses and cobbled together kind of like my education from different environments, a lot of times because like the traditional pathways weren't always necessarily open. But yeah, journalism was a part of that. Journalism has always been, any kind of storytelling is something that I love and try to connect to. But yeah, journalism was kind of my gateway drug into filmmaking. So. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. I think what I want to ask next then is, speaking of this, is breaking into the industry. Like Mayumi, you mentioned you do translation and cultural work, and Sherren, I'd love to hear how all three of you how did you use your independent work to break into the industry? And since this is about sustainable careers, also, what are your thoughts on entering the industry through other streams like podcasts, YouTube, and well, plays, because Sherren, you said directed plays as well. And that's kind of when you first got the bug. But yeah, if you just want to speak to that. So once again, just how have you used any of your independent work to break into the industry? And then any thoughts on entering through independent streams? And whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
I think it helps to have different kind of backgrounds, just like JP said about the journalism, and then when Sherren with theater, like I come from a theater background too. Everything kind of comes down to storytelling. I think it's all connected. So I think it's always great to have other things that you're doing. I think the one thing that I would note for, and when you have when you're working on a set with like different responsibilities, even myself as a dialect coach and a consultant, I let it be known that I'm a creator, that I'm an actor, that I tell stories, and that my desire is directing and writing. And because you'd be surprised how many people would just assume that what you're doing is what you want to do. So, and a lot of people on set are actually like, they're actually writers, they're actually designers, or, you know, they all have different things that they're doing. So that was one thing I think that I continuously do to make sure that whatever I'm doing is contributing to what I really want to do, which is now acting, writing, and directing. So be vocal about what you want to do as you're doing all this stuff, so that it all streamlines to what you really want to do.
I will say I advocate for, if you can self-produce content, it is amazing. It is an amazing experience. And like for me, so building off of kind of what I was talking about previously of like kind of taking all of those kind of screenwriting courses and night courses, I got to a place where I was writing samples and I couldn't get meetings and I couldn't get in the door. A lot of times because people would look at scripts and be like, they were all very queer. They were all from a very specific point of view that at the time, I think the industry didn't necessarily feel the imperative to address. So for me, I was like, I was lucky enough to be, and this is like, you know, what Mayumi was talking about, I was lucky enough to be working with a lot of friends who had complementing skills, who were all kind of within the industry doing their own things. And we decided to collaborate together on a web series. And that web series for me was huge because it gave me an opportunity, not only like, I mean, writing is my passion, but I got to direct, I got to produce, I got to see kind of all the different things involved in that process, which was huge. It got rid of the gatekeeper. So I was able to just tell a story and just put it into the world and have people respond to it, which was really cool. And it also immediately establishes, like, it puts your voice out into the world in a very direct way, which, you know, sometimes I think for a lot of writers, you're sending these scripts out and they all sit on desks and like, how do you get your scripts, you know, read? How do you get things seen? And I found that, you know, from experience, producers will look at shorts, they'll look at web series, they'll look at things that they can kind of immediately consume and give them a good sense of voice. So that to me was kind of why I pursued a web series, and it was huge. It was a turning point for sure in my career in terms of making connections and getting my work out there. So I'll always recommend that for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Janet-Rose, when you asked the question, I was a little confused because in my mind, it's the only way. You need independent work because people are looking for your voice. They want to know what you can actually do, what you're about. So you need some kind of sample. But I think on what Mayumi was saying about, you know, all the other things that you do in your life, even if it is, you know, work on yourself, I think that's all of that is contributing to the person and artist that you are. So I think, yeah, for sure, it's a direct correlation. And just a kind of fun fact, JP, I don't know if you remember this, but the first time we met was on a panel at Toronto Web Fest with your web series and my web series. And that was like my first thing that was out in the world. And here we are now. It's pretty cool.
That's like, I mean, we were laughing before in the virtual green room where we were like, what are you up to? What are you up to? And it's like, it's true, charting kind of like this course from like in this independently produced work to kind of the gigs, right? So yeah, it's cool. Anyway, yes, I totally remember.
I love that, because it's like, yeah, you do have to have your own voice and offer that, and that's what captures, right? So I guess for people watching who maybe want to break into the industry, but it's so daunting, what would the three of you say to like the fear of making your own stuff or the fear of not being heard? Because it sounds like all three of you just kind of did it anyways because you had faced all these doors. So I'd love to hear if you have any words for anyone who's kind of facing those doors right now or have that self-doubt.
I think firstly, I know that, you know, a lot of people who make their first short films are really nervous about, you know, getting into TIFF and like worried that it might fail. And people think that Benjamin was my first film, but it was not. Like, I made a dozen short films before that film, and some of them no one ever saw. Some of them I just made to see if I could do it. And I did, you know, 48-hour film challenges. I did all kinds of little things. And for me, it's always been helpful to just think about making work to better your own craft. Like you do it because you need to for yourself.
Yeah.
And don't put that pressure on your work.
I love that. And also don't expect to get in TIFF with your first story.
Yeah.
JP or Mayumi, you have anything to add?
I mean, like, yeah, like absolutely. I think when you are first starting, it's like to Sherren's point, it's like you kind of think about all of it. Like you think about all of it all at once, and you're like, this is my one chance, this is my one shot, I'm just going to do this one thing, and then if it doesn't succeed or if it doesn't hit this benchmark, then it's done. And I don't think that it works like that. You know, I think it does have to be about, you know, having confidence in your voice and in your idea and being like, I'm just going to do the best job that I can with this. And even if you make something and no one sees it, maybe you worked with somebody, you collaborated with somebody who will remember you, who will then hire you for something later. Or maybe, you know, you will learn something key that, you know, will then lead you to your next film, which maybe will get into TIFF. But I do think that the first kind of step you have to take is just say, I'm doing this to Sherren's point. I'm doing this because I love this and I just want to do it. I just want to learn. I'm just going to see what this is. I'm just going to do it. And if you go into it that way, I think that takes all of the stuff off of it about it needing to do certain things or be seen by certain people or whatever. That I think you're setting yourself up in some ways for failure if you set too many bars to jump. Just do it because you want to do it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just echoing both of you, but I think we tend to forget that people go watch movies because they want to be affected or you know, they want to experience the story. It doesn't matter what festival you got into or how many likes or viewership you got on YouTube or whatever it is. It's the experience. And as filmmakers, I think if there is something that is making you curious about a character or a situation, or you have a question, then follow that, and that becomes the script, the story. And then if you have visions of that script, then you direct, and then you make a movie. And if it gets shown to other people, then that's amazing. That's the business side of it a little bit. It's, as a storyteller, I think if you have that thing, then what I've learned is that someone will tell a similar story. Do you want to be the one telling it, or do you want someone else to tell it for you? If you want to tell it, then you should do it, because you probably have the most unique way to do it on your own way. So if you have that drive, then 100% you should do it. But I also do want to say that it's not a race. Just because you didn't make it this year, you can make it next year. I think it's like stories and music, any creator, everybody goes through that anguish of like, oh my God, where is my creative juice? Like, what is my voice? And you start thinking, oh, this is the end of me. But as human beings, as we grow, I think these topics that is concerning to you will come up. It'll naturally come to you, and you'll realize that, oh, I'm drawn into stories like this or themes like this. Maybe that is my voice. I think I learned that as I kept making films after my first one, just realizing, what the hell am I? What do I want to tell? What is my voice? When people say, that's a unique voice, I'm like, I don't know what the hell my voice is. My voice, I don't know. My identity, who cares? I don't know. And then the more I made it, I felt like, oh, I tend to lean towards this. I still don't know. I think it's still forming, and it's an ever-changing progress. And I think we shouldn't forget that when we're creating. But because it's the business side makes us feel like that's secondary, when I think that's actually primary.
Oh, I love that. There was so much insight in just like a few sentences from everybody. I had a thought about what I wanted to move on to next from that. And I think it was to do with creating, well, just because you've all come from different aspects, and it sounds like, everyone here is kind of saying like variations of believe in yourself. You have a unique story. Keep going, knock on those doors. We all hear that when we enter any kind of industry, and especially creative. I'd love to hear how, and because it was mentioned before, Mayumi, you had said imposter syndrome. I would love if all three of you could tell me if you still have imposter syndrome, or how you beat that, because I mean, you can probably be like an Oscar winner and still have it. Well, maybe, I don't know, but but yeah, anything you'd want to say to the audience that regarding that imposter syndrome, or how you got, because now you're sitting on this panel as who people look up to, but once before you were probably in the audience. So yeah.
I mean, I still have imposter syndrome, and it is still definitely something I navigate all the time. And like, it comes in and out, and some days are better than others. But to I think like to Mayumi's point, where it was like the idea of like the industry being a race, sometimes you can feel like, if you're thinking about an idea or working through a particular project and it's taking a long time, you can start to get really insecure and feel like you're falling behind. You can get into a headspace that can be really self-defeating really easily. And the only thing that I've found that helps in any way, and even still, again, it's still there, is just doing. Like, you just have to keep doing it. Like, some days are going to be better than others. Some days you're going to like crank out some pages and they might not be great, but maybe the next day they'll be better. And I think you kind of just have to, you can't stop. I find that stopping is the thing that allows you sometimes to really sit in it. And I think that like, if you keep going forward and just keep like, again, setting like attainable goals for yourself and just keep pushing forward, that has been the thing that I think for me has helped kind of keep those critical voices at bay. And also, I think surrounding yourself with good collaborators who you trust, because I think that's the other piece too, is if you do have work and you show it to people that you know are going to read or look at it and give your honest kind of feedback in a supportive way, I find that also helps navigating that internal critical voice too.
Community is so important. I thought, why am I invited to this panel? I sincerely thought, how I haven't broken in. I haven't, what is happening? Why am I in this? I thought like, that's my imposter syndrome. I thought, what, wow. But somehow I'm here. Quickly, I realized that when you start faking it, people start to believe it. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And you're still not sure. And then when you work with people who you think are so sure, they're not sure. So that actually demystified so much of like people who we think are so confident and are together, who are directing $4 million episodes. And they're not aware, they're not sure, and they make mistakes. And that has given me a bit of a courage, even though I still, like I mentioned before, I thought, why the hell am I on this panel with 3 amazing people? So I feel that way. But another thought I wanted to add is, oh, thank you, Samir. I'm not fishing. I didn't say that to fish for compliments. I wanted to say that there was like a year where I was bitter, feeling like, okay, I didn't get into, for years in a row, I didn't get into these like whatever competitions or talent programs or whatnot. And then there was a year of bitterness where I thought like, oh, well, but then I realized that I stopped putting out my work. I started to keep it to myself, when of course you can't go anywhere if everything is just staying in your work office. You still need to output. And that is, I think, the hard part, where you need to sort of push yourself. And community has helped me a lot to make sure that sometimes you can definitely, you can afford yourself to like go inwards and just reflect, and that's important too. But if you don't put out your work, then it's really hard for anyone to recognize that your work is there and your talent is there. So as much as it's hard, I started to just not care, to, even if I put it out. I mean, as an actor, we all do that out every week. And then as soon as I abandoned this connection to the result, it became, weirdly, the results started coming. When I was like, excuse my language, I was like, fuck all y'all. And I just submitted, even though I didn't meet the whatever qualification, I didn't meet the things, I still somehow got into things or won awards. And I thought, wow, I guess it doesn't matter. I just need to just do it and then not expect anything. And sometimes it comes back, and it's okay if it doesn't.
Yeah. Mayumi sort of said this in the last question, but I think when you were talking about, leaning into your voice and finding your voice, I think knowing yourself is a huge part of this whole thing. And imposter syndrome are the voices of your demons. And if you can recognize that and, talk to them in a way that can appease them, that's the goal. And I'll also say that I know that for me as an Asian woman, I have a tendency to follow the rules and to have very high standards for myself. And, it's been known that women need to feel like they're really eligible for something before they apply for work. And other demographics don't do that. So recognize that your standards are your own and they're not the world standards sometimes. And don't be the person that stops you from doing what you can do.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you, all 3 of you. I think this is a perfect spot to go for a break and get some light on Sherren. So everybody stretch your legs, have some water, use the bathroom if you need to. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know what I was thinking?
What?
I realized that I didn't want to give the impression that TV directors get hired by faking it. I wanted to clarify that they're not hired to have answers for everything. They're hired because of their uniqueness of the voice or their perspective, or that's how directors, I think, are often hired, not because they'll have answers to everything. That's what I wanted to say.
I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect way to lead in. And since it's about sustainable careers, I think maybe if you all three of you want to touch quickly on like the differences between, since you've all worked in TV, but maybe in other streams, or from TV versus independent film or independent work in general, if you want to touch on that, and then we can answer some audience questions as well.
For sure. I mean, I can speak to the fact that, I mean, when you're doing your own kind of like indie work, there's obviously like a level of control that you have over. I mean, there's a level of control you don't have, but there's also a level of creative control that you do have. And I think the biggest kind of transition for me was understanding, and I think this is a thing that I tell a lot of folks who want to get into television writing, is that like it's collaborative. It is a collaborative art form. It is collaborative work. When you come into a writer's room, if you're hired on a show, you are like brought in to help kind of like support and elevate somebody's vision. Like they saw something in your voice that they want to contribute to that vision, but you're there collaborating and working with other people to do the best work you all can do. And so I think, like, to me, the biggest thing about kind of moving from again, that independent realm or like self-produced stuff to kind of being able to get in and be hired on gigs is that for a lot of them, it's going to be about kind of working with and cooperating and collaborating and kind of managing your expectations. In an ideal world, you follow those and you eventually get the opportunity to have your own shows and do your own things. And then again, that creative control can kind of come back. But I do think a lot of it is about cooperating and working alongside folks, and not just, and I mean, I'm talking about it in a writer's room sense, but obviously like you go to set and you're working with the directors and you're working with the actors. So it's a continual active creative collaboration. So.
Janet-Rose, was the question, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Yeah, if you want to speak on the difference between that you found on that. And I just wanted to also say, JP, that I love you talked about the collaborative process, especially because you're mainly known as a writer and people think of writers as people sitting in their rooms by themselves. But it's when you're
I do that. I do that. I do sit alone in my room quite a bit.
Yeah.
but yes, it does require a lot of think tank and a lot of working with folks.
And then I'm sure, Sherren, with you being in the edit suite right now, that's you being alone, but you're still collaborating. So but if you wanted to touch on if like what you found working in TV versus the independent.
Well, I think what JP said applies to directing in television.
Oh, sorry.
You.
I have a little bit of allergies. Pardon me.
But before I started directing TV, I was shadowing this director and I asked him if it was different to direct TV versus his own work. And his immediate response was, oh yeah, for sure, it's different. And then he pauses and he's like, actually, no, it's the same. And now I totally get what he means, because it is different in terms of, yes, when you make your own independent work, you do have all this, it's your vision, you're not serving anyone else's vision. But when you're working in TV, you're here to kind of, I love it because you get to step into another person's point of view and really try to connect with that and deliver that. But at the end of the day, you can't escape your own eyes, and you're going to bring yourself to every project. But I think that's what makes collaboration so magical, because it just comes up with something that is not your own, but that is your own, you know?
I actually haven't worked in feature as much as TV. And so I don't know if I can contribute as much. I can only contribute in like indie film sets.
That would be better, I think, like TV versus the indie film sets, if you want to speak on that.
If you find the right people on TV sets, they are also indie people as well. So it's not that separate. And sometimes it's actually more, maybe I'll talk a bit more in a practical way, like when you're trying to do indie projects, when you don't have much funding, or like when you don't have gear access, like sometimes working with people who are in the union, who are working on union shows, they have a little bit more resources, or they want to work on something like a passion project if they're not drained. So, and then then you get like quality film crew who are working on like US TV series. So you shouldn't quite separate it as TV and feature indie stuff, because I think everybody really, if you find the right people, they're all in it for story and trying to create a great project. So if you can dip your toes into both, I think it would be really amazing to just broaden your community. Because sometimes I think when you stay in indie, it gets a little cliquey. So you want to sort of expand as well to make sure that you're not getting too much in, you're not too insulated in your bubble. At least for me, I feel like I always want to expand my world, so my knowledge is expanding as well.
Yes, I love that. Since we're all talking on this point, I just was wondering if all three of you have any advice. This is an audience question on how you found collaborators as a filmmaker, or if you have like a story about how maybe you randomly met your favorite collaborator, or if you always collaborate with different people. Yeah, just something the audience is looking into as well.
I think showing up to film festivals is one of the biggest ways to just instantly connect with them, because obviously you meet them in person, but you also get to see their work. And a lot of people, I think, who are attending film festivals they either have a film, or they want to be part of the film festival, or they were in the past. So you get all kinds of levels of people in one place, which is really exciting. So, you know, you meet the people who are emerging, and then there are people who's been in the industry for like 30, 40 years. So I think you should show up and just be open to any kind of interaction, not sort of just going for that, oh, I'm just going to try to get the big league people, like expand, because you have no idea how many just recent grads of universities and schools who are phenomenal, and then they might change your career completely. So I think film festivals is the best place to go.
Yeah.
I would say, oh, sorry, Sherren.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, yeah, absolutely. Like industry events, 100%, festivals, like, you know, whatever, any kind of functions that happen, open houses. Like, I feel like all of those are opportunities usually to get a sense of like whatever the organization that's hosting the thing. But the people that you meet in the crowd and the people that you socialize with are often the people who are at the same level of your career or who are doing similar things. I've also found like mentorship programs, you know, like kind of like organizations like BIPOC TV and Film. Like, I feel like whenever Ink, like I think like Ink Drinks or like Ink Canada on Facebook, it's like any kind of groups of people who are doing similar things and who host events or do those kinds of stuff. Like, I think to Mayumi's point, it's like you go into the industry being like, I want to meet like, you know, whatever, like Mike Flanagan, or I want to like work with so-and-so. And then you realize that the people you're probably actually going to end up working with and who will end up giving you jobs are like the person at the bar next to you at that writer's event, right? Like, so I think getting yourself out there and going to any kind of industry affiliated events, any kind of workshops or mentorships, any kind of anything that has some kind of structure and connects you with other people in creative fields is the path to finding collaborators. That is, every collaborator I've ever worked with, I've met through kind of those channels. So, yeah.
For me, it was Craigslist and Mandy.com and and I don't know if Mandy.com is still a thing, but obviously Facebook. I think it's really important to know, one, what you're looking for in terms of collaborators, and two, what you want to offer. And I also, started off, working as a PA and then meeting people on set who are like fellow PAs. And I always had this sense that people are there to not be PAs. They're there for something else, So I would always talk to the PAs and ask, what's your dream? Like, what do you want to be? And then I would find someone who's a future DP and a future designer, and then we would make stuff together. And it was really important for me that everybody was getting something out of it if I wasn't able to pay people. So I wanted us all to do something that would help us get a credit or do something we love. Yeah.
Wow. I think that's all great advice for the audience there on finding collaborators. You both brought up points that I want to address because there's an audience question and then one of our next things. Let's talk about JP. You brought up mentoring and diversity, or mentoring initiatives. So I was wondering if all three of you or any of you had any mentoring or diversity initiatives that have offered opportunities to build your career in TV and film, and if you want to speak to that.
For sure. Like, yeah, I'm in a bunch right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, yes, like, so when I was speaking about kind of the web series opening doors for me, one of the first doors to open was the Writers Guild, and Bell Media used to do this program called the Bell Media Diverse Screenwriters Program. And they did it for about, I think it was 6 years. There were like 6 cohorts of us. But that, like, the strength of the web series and kind of my like long 30-minute sample version of it was enough to get me in the door in that program. And it was through that program that I also met a number of people who I've worked with in the industry. But I got to, go to Writers Guild functions and got to do all of these different things, and it kind of built from that. But there were so many. Like, there was like a Hot Docs Diverse Voices program that I did at one point, which was great. I know Warner Media, the Warner Media, like screenwriters program that Mayumi and I are in right now, right? Like, that's another one. I think the industry at this moment in time is finally, in a very real way, understanding the concerns around kind of, inclusion, diversity, and the fact that there are all of these talented voices who are not having access. And so a lot of organizations are now putting money into these mentorships. And I say, like, I encourage people to apply to them, even if you don't feel like you're, like, some people will feel like I don't know if I have enough credits, or I don't know if my work's strong enough. Just apply, because I think, for the 5 that you apply to, if you get into 2 or if you get into 1, like, that is a step. And there are a ton of them around right now. But yeah, I would say apply to those. And BIPOC TV and film, I know I keep bringing them up, but they have so many great programs. so many wonderful resources. Again, training, like I know they had like Kiwi Lynch did this really wonderful program, training story coordinators, which is often your first, your entry point job in a writer's room. They've had showrunner workshops and kids writing book boot camps. So yeah, there's tons of stuff, and I say apply to them because they're helpful.
No, we stand by POC TV.
Amazing work, yeah.
Yes. Sherren, do you have anything to add?
Well, I haven't actually done a lot of diversity mentorship programs. I don't think I'm any good at the applications. But I think it's really helpful to have just people in the industry. I think these programs are really great, but there's still a barrier to entry, So you have to find people in the industry that you connect to, and that takes work and research and relationship building. But I would really encourage people to reach out to filmmakers or people that they want to connect with and try to build a relationship with them. I think people are really interested in mentoring other people right now, especially. And I have people, I don't really have, actual mentors that have taken me on or anything like that. But there's, 2 or 3 people who are further in their careers that I feel comfortable calling, if I have questions. And I think it's good just to remind yourself that you can call people and they're willing to help. And I've learned too that in meetings, I learned this too late, but you should always have an ask. And because people want to help, but they don't really know how. But so if you have something that's very specific and they can do for you, they will.
Yeah. You have an example of an ask, just so the audience has an idea?
I'd like to do a table read. Do you know any actors? Do you have a venue? Or yeah, and then it also gives them a sense that you're working on something and you're working towards something. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayumi, do you want to speak on any mentorships that you've been part of? Oh, and also Sherren, I was going to say, is maybe you'll be the mentor soon. That's why.
Yeah.
Mayumi, go ahead.
I'm just gonna echo both of them. It's don't be afraid to ask. I know you think that you don't want to take up space or time, or you feel like it might be bothersome for them, and most of the times it's not. And even if it is, the worst case is they say no. They won't, it's not, most likely that won't be I will never see that person again. It's most likely I'm just not available. And it's okay. And you run into them again, and then you just, I think the only thing is, and there's a lot of fellowship and mentorship programs and all that, and I've done generals in the States as well, and it's always hard to keep in touch, stay in touch with them and it's hard maintaining friendship in general. So one of the things I think is, because I think even when Sherren was coming to shoot in Vancouver, I was like, oh, Sherren, let's meet up. We couldn't, we didn't have time, but it's just nice because we met back in Whistler maybe 3 years ago, and I've seen her do amazing things, and I wanted to learn from her. And so, but it's just kind of it's just a simple nudge that will just help you. You don't always have to be BFFs. It's just about hey, I'm here, you're here, and we're both trying to do this same thing. And, you just find collaborators through that way too, because sometimes you're not even talking about your career. You're just maybe talking about Dune, or you're just talking about whatever it is, the flooding and whatever it is. And it's just nice to have a connection. So, and I'm so guilty of that too. I'm kind of talking to myself that like, hey, you should do follow-up emails more. But it's being diligent in that will take you far. It's surprising how people will be delighted to hear from you when you feel guilty of not talking to them for over a year, and they're like, oh yeah, let's catch up. And then you do a Zoom call and you're like, wow, it's like we met last week. It's crazy. So I do this to myself, which is why I'm saying that like you build up so much guilt that you stop doing that very simple email or a text or a DM. And then when you do it, it's actually the easiest thing. So I hope this gives you courage to just get rid of the guilt. And once you do this, because the mentorship, there's a lot of those, but a lot of them, once it finishes, it's not their job for us to be in line. Ultimately, we need to take initiative to demand what we want from those fellowships and mentorships. Mm-hmm. And it's okay because you were selected to demand that. So yeah.
I love that.
I also did want to say, sorry, just building off of what you were saying, Mayumi, you made a really great point too of like, you know, sometimes maybe you might reach out to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to like, can you mentor me on something? Or can we like connect at this point in time? And then it doesn't happen. But like a lot of times in my career and in my life, it's like, I will reconnect with those people 3 years down the line, and then there will be an opportunity for potentially mentorship or creative collaboration. So I think it's like, sometimes it's just seeds that need to be watered and eventually they bloom. And I mean, obviously you're into it for the seed, you're not into it for the flower, but like if a flower comes from it, I'm using a lot of metaphors. If a flower comes from it, that's like amazing and that's ideal, right? So I think patience too is a big part of it. And to Mayumi's point, maintaining that connection and kind of keeping that channel open with people.
No, that's great. I love that. And I love also, because you've all kind of touched on it too, where it's like be open to collaboration and be open to speaking with others, but also be a human and don't just expect to just meet someone to work with. Be a human, have connections, not just focus on the becoming the next whoever. Okay, so because we were talking about this before with your independent work, one of the audience questions is, how have you sustained yourself financially while doing the abundant, unpaid or underpaid labor of creation? And I think that's a good question, especially for BIPOC creators, is so often we are, women, and it's like, we're kind of expected to work for less. And Sherren, you had mentioned that earlier about also expecting more. So can you speak about how you've sustained yourself financially during the beginnings of your careers?
I think this is the most important thing. And I think the biggest hurdle for so many people. And I actually worked in production for 7 years when I was coming up and trying to make my own work. And that for me really worked. And people always ask, you know, should you work in the industry? Should you not work in the industry? And again, you have to know, some people prefer to like work at Starbucks and then have all of their creative heads in, you know, their filmmaker brain. And some people like me, I found it very beneficial to work in production because that allowed me to learn a lot and make some contacts. But you have to know what works for you. And then after the CFC, I was temping and I was working at you know, different offices and a stationery store just to make ends meet. I had kind of decided that I was going to be a struggling artist if that was going to be the rest of my life. So you kind of have to decide where your boundaries are as well. Yeah.
I love that, because that's kind of a realistic way as well. Is, do you want to be in this position to struggle, quote unquote? We don't always have to struggle, but also being aware that This is a career, even if you are the best of the best, sometimes you still have lulls of unemployment. So,
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I worked before I made a proper inroad into scripted TV, which was kind of where I always wanted to go. I worked in reality television, and I worked in reality television casting for a really long time. And that was for years, like working, you know, again, like just kind of casting different shows and making lots of contacts and writing at night. I worked briefly for a period of time in a bookstore, which was really great. I worked as an assistant to a producer. I worked as a PA. Basically, I mean, I feel like it was a combination of like the kind of the starving artist thing that Sherren's talking about, and also I tried my best with a lot of my jobs to stay parallel to the industry in some way, just so that it stayed real. Because I was always scared that like if I took the wrong turn, I would like start doing math and then never come back or something. I don't know. Not to say that math is bad. Math is great. You need it in life. But like I just, yeah, for me, I tried to stay kind of adjacent to what I wanted to do so that when an opportunity could come, I would be like well positioned. And then truthfully, again, talking about collaborators, I met a ton of people in reality television. I met a ton of people in the bookstore who ended up being people I worked with later, like in scripted, right? So it's a small world. I think you kind of just have to, for yourself, determine your boundaries about what you're comfortable doing. You obviously have to allocate time for yourself, for your creativity, but you need to eat, you need to pay rent, you need to do your stuff. It's a personal balance, but you have to do what feels right to you, I think.
Yeah, totally. I think I feel I also was very conscious of trying to do jobs that were adjacent to what I wanted to do, but then I had a phase of I'm just gonna do whatever. I worked at retail. I did so many different kinds of jobs, but actually those experiences gave me, as a human being, I just saw so many more different people in the field, in different fields. So none of it was like bad experience. It all kind of contributes to learning about human condition. But I think when you're doing jobs and trying to sustain yourself that is not directly what you want to do, it actually, maybe I'll talk about how when you become quite good at what you're doing that is not directly what you want to do, people would want you to stay in that position. And that's not that great. So you need to learn at one point to say, I'm going to say no to that if this isn't the condition, or just to make sure that where are you, assess where you're at right now and decide, like, am I at a place where I'm still going to do this job to support the other dream that I have? Or am I going to go full throttle, full on this dream? And then maybe I may be worried about rent next year or month or so, but you'll figure it out. You kind of need to, at one point, I at least once a year, assess where you're at and see if this job is serving you or not. And if it's not, then how can you change that? What can you demand? And if that's not met, can you walk away? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that the same goes for unpaid work, like stuff that is in your field and is stuff that you love, but is unpaid. Like, does that actually serve you? Same kind of mentality.
Totally. There. I have the 3 rule. If it's money, or if it's passion, like story, or is it people? And I need to have 2 ticked off. Yeah. Now I at least I have to have 2 ticked off. Before, if there was 1, I'll do it. But now I'm at the point where, like, I need to have at least 2, or I have to say no, because there's other things that I'm doing that I want to make sure that I'm spending time on those things. But I always want to do free or volunteer or any sort of work that is, uplifting other people as well. So it's a good talk that you must have with yourself oftentimes when you're thinking about financial support.
Yeah. No, that was great. All three of you had such great points. And I just love also the fact about drawing boundaries with yourself and with others with this, because finances, so often in this industry, we can all get pulled into being, do it for the passion, do it because you love it. But no, we all need to pay rent, we all need to eat. So this is great advice. And for anyone looking to hire Mayumi, she just gave you her 2 out of 3. So okay, so let me see. I was wondering if you could speak to some of our sponsors, because what diversity and mentoring initiatives can organizations like the DGC, Directors Guild Canada, WGC, the Writers Guild of Canada, and Warner Media, what can they offer creators to make the leap to TV and film, and how can they make it more sustainable? If you have any ideas or that they can take.
I mean, I think JP and I can say that cash is so nice. Warner Media no, legit. Warner Media has, and I think they've talked about it openly, that all the participants they're given like a very fair wage to sustain ourselves while we're in the program. So one, that gives us a huge load of responsibility and accountability, and it's amazing. So, and of course, financially, you just feel so much more obviously stable, but it just sets this expectation which I think is really great. I wish that all the other, but I know it's financially, I don't think everything and every program can do that, but I can say one thing, that is a very nice way to treat their participants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it addresses, because one of the things that I've also noticed, even now after I've like gone on and been like, oh, I'll have, like sign up for every single mentorship you could ever see. Like, obviously, I mean, judge and decide what works best for you. But one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of mentorships is that this consideration around the fact that if it is a job-focused mentorship that's desiring to put people into the workplace, they will set up their kind of program during business hours or during times when otherwise you might be working to support yourself or working to build your credits or working to do whatever. So one of the things that I actually really, really appreciated about the Warner Media program is the fact that they were very conscious of work schedule and were like, this is, if you're working on a show or you're working on something or you have a day job, like, let us know. We can set our expectations around deliverables. We will make sure that you're financially compensated. All of those things are steps which, again, help navigate, some of the barriers and some of the boundaries that we kind of face. And in terms of like the Writers Guild and the DGC, but I can speak more specifically to the Writers Guild, I think that there's, there has been this previous work that was done again through the Bell Media Diversity Program, but I know that in the last couple of years, there's been a much more active attempt with a diversity panel on which, or a diversity council on which I'm a member. But there's been these attempts to really do outreach, to bring in more membership, to waive membership fees for, like marginalized folks, to try and help understand some of these systemic barriers and create opportunities and support so that people can kind of come in and get jobs and feel supported. So I do know that that's, those things are changing. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think that it's a process. But yeah, I think that that's been very helpful, has been kind of seeing some of those institutional changes happening within the guild to kind of reflect again, the fact that there's been this blind spot in terms of storytelling in our country. Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
I know there's like a bunch of questions, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I know that for me, I did a program called With Women in View, where I shadowed on Dino Dana with the promise of, not the promise, but like it came with a job, it came with an episode. So I think these training programs that come with that, I think, are very successful because you enter into a workplace not as a trainee, but as a professional, as the next director. So you just get a different attitude from your peers, and I think that perspective is important. And I've also know this other program, I think it's a US, I don't remember where it is exactly, but the network pays for a director's second episode. So they encourage producers to rehire. So it's not just about, you know, ticking off a box for one episode. It's like you want to keep someone on. So I think those initiatives are great, and it'd be great to see DGC do some of those.
It would be so nice if DGC required all of these American projects to have at least one director that gets to shadow an episode and is guaranteed an episode. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I think that's something that's interesting in all the unions that we have to talk about, is like being in our Canadian market with our big brother. I don't even know what they would really qualify as in America, but how we coexist and how we, you know, work in those markets, but also try to break into, but also keep our own identity. So I think it's really good bringing that into the conversation with these programs, because even at ACTRA, we talk about, I mean, that's a huge thing for actors as well. So I wanted to ask, we did have someone here for the directors. If you have any basic steps that are important for a director, like, or maybe what basic things made you into the director you are today?
I can go. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't have that answer, but what, because look at our reactions. Both of us are like, first of all, there is no one type of director. There's no, every director is so different. There's different types of directors. There's directors who are very technical, that are very acting oriented, very script oriented. It's very different types of directors. So it's kind of hard to outline what is the basic step, but a really good advice I got from a showrunner once was a director's job is just to be with them, whether that's the actors or the crew or the writer. You are there to listen and support and guide when it's needed. So it's not always about dictating. It's not always about leading the crowd. It's sometimes just holding them. So that was a really a good revelation that I had when I heard that. It kind of lifted a lot of stress and responsibility, even though it feels still responsible, but yeah.
That's such an interesting question. I used to teach filmmaking 101 to kids at TIFF.
Yes.
And the way that, because I would go through every role and I would describe what every role does. And the director, I would ask, you know, the kids, what do the directors do? And they'd be like, they tell the actors how to act. And like, I think that's like the first thing you think of. But what I always end up telling them is that ultimately the director is the visionary. They are the person with the vision, and they are the person who is working with everyone involved to get on the same page and make the same movie.
I love that, because it's like, wait, because we're talking about collaboration, but then you have to also think about the vision at the end. It has to be cohesive, or it's not going to be good. So that's
like if you're going on a trip, you need a road map, and you need to all be going down the same path. Otherwise, you'll all end up in different places.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love that. Okay, well, I think we're almost out of time, so apologies to anybody who didn't get their questions answered in the audience, but we did kind of address most of them through our conversation. And so to end off with this great panel, I wanted to ask all three of you, what advice, if you could go back in time to your, self before you started this career, what is one piece of advice you wish you would have heard from yourself, or that you could offer to yourself? We can start with, I'm going to see who looks like they're ready. Sherren.
Well, I answered this question recently, so I mean, it changes a lot over time, all the time, but I think one thing that I keep coming back to is I kind of wonder what my career would be like if I had followed the rules less, because I've always been really good at following the rules, and I think that is one of my strengths, like people like working with me, because I'm not going to be a troublemaker. But I've always been really inspired by people who just really challenge the rules and think outside the box, and realizing that there are no rules. There really are no rules. Even though people tell you there are rules, you can always question it. And I think we're in a time where things are being questioned. Like all these structures are just there and nobody's really questioning why things have to be a certain way. So you can make your own path and do it your way, and be a bit more bold with how you approach how you want to go about in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. JP?
Oh, that we're all just kind of like tucking ourselves away from the camera to have to answer that question.
This is so
yeah, I mean, I think it is kind of very similar to kind of what Sherren's saying, in terms of, I think I allowed a lot of my kind of those initial steps and into the industry to be dictated by fear, and dictated by like, what are people doing and how can I do something that looks like what somebody else is doing? Like, what's the hot thing to write? What's the cool thing? Like, what's the right path to take into this? There's a lot of like, again, that pressure to do the thing because everybody else is doing the thing, or is that the right thing or the wrong thing? Whereas I think when I just started to actually just say, you know what, like, I just want to do this thing. Like, I like this thing and I just want to do this thing. And that's when things actually started happening. So I feel like if I had like just spent more time really listening to myself as opposed to worrying about kind of what other people were telling me to do, I think I mean, in an ideal world, maybe it would have happened faster, but I think it would have maybe alleviated so much of the stress early in my career about accomplishing things and about needing to hit certain benchmarks and about needing to be, you know, to get into certain like whatever institutions or to like, you know, get certain jobs. I think listening to that was the thing that I needed to just listen to myself ultimately. Yeah, I would say that's kind of the biggie for sure.
Thank you. Mayumi?
Yeah, this is really hard. I think if you have something you love that you found, love it so hard as much as you want, and you have no idea how much of power that has in the future. It's crazy how when someone is so, even if it's not related to what you want to do, sometimes that just becomes your strength and then it just leads you somewhere. It's just so odd how I wish I painted when I really wanted to be a Disney animator or a painter when I was a kid, and I didn't. And then because I thought, oh, that's not feasible, it's not a realistic dream. I also didn't know what that career path was, but I I wish I just did it, which I could still do, I guess. It's and when you see people who are quote unquote successful, the trajectory is usually they just kept doing what they love. And they went deeper and deeper and deeper. And sometimes they do other things, but they come back to what they do. It's kind of all connected. So it's such a blessing if there is something you find that you love. And there are so many folks who struggle to find that. So if you do have that, then yeah, treat that as a blessing. It really is so rare. So go as hard as you can, and then see see where that will take you. It's really fascinating how whether it's gaming or honestly whatever it is. So yeah, I think that is something that if I have kids, will I be able to do that for my kids? I don't know. I hope I will have the generosity as a parent to one day be like, do whatever you want, without worrying about their consequences. But I see how so many successful people, that is exactly how they became them. So that's what I think I'll say.
Thank you. I love ending on that note, because sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in the comparison game or the social media. I'm not there, I'm not at these goalposts or these signs. But it's also important to remember that what we do as creators, we do it because we want to. And a lot of people in any industry can't say they do it because they're doing it to survive. So it is a privilege and an honor to be able to tell stories and have that as our vocations. So I want to thank all three of you so much for spending the last hour or so with me and the Real Asian. Thank you so much. One of my favorite festivals. I can't believe I'm moderating this. It's like a dream come true. So thank you so much. And I get to speak with all three of you who are amazing. So thank you, Sherren, JP, and Mayumi, so much for your time and words and wisdom.
Thank you, Janet-Rose.
Thank you, Janet-Rose.
Thank you.
Everybody else.
This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I just want to say thanks so much for all three of you for joining us today. I hope none of you feel imposter syndrome. Your voices, I'm so glad your voices are a part of our TV and film landscape. You're all amazing, like filmmakers and stars. And I'd also really want to thank you, Janet-Rose, for directing this conversation. I really think the audience is going to benefit from this one. And we'd love to continue this talk on our film forum on Discord. If you aren't on Discord yet, we'd love for you to join. We dropped a link into the chat and we'll have a QR code posted up in a moment. Please scan the QR code for our survey too and let us know your thoughts. Again, thank you so much to Janet-Rose, Mayumi, JP, and Sherren for today's convo. Thank you to Jamie and Carmelle, our amazing ASL interpreters. And thank you, Tony, our awesome live captioner. For our backend support, thank you so much to Jasmine, Mimi, and Joe. Just a reminder that Real Asian is going on until November 19th, which is actually tomorrow. And if you'd like to learn more about our programming and how to buy a ticket, please look up realasian.com/festival. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you take care and we hope you enjoyed our Real Ideas panels. Thank you so much. Bye.